Hello and welcome to L'Oreal Professionnel's Cribs Edition. My name is Ashley Zajac and I will be your kitchen beautician of the day. All jokes aside, I am so excited and honored to be with you guys today. My passion for our industry started as a little girl. My grandparents owned salons outside the Metro Detroit area, and it's just been a deep-seated inside me. I used to show up as a little girl and be able to sweep hair for candy bars, and it was unbelievably incredible experience. And one of the things that I'm missing being at home is that connection with my guests. Shoot out a little heart if you also miss that connection, the one-on-one connecting with each other and connecting with your guests. So I'm seeing a lot of friends joining in. If you have joined on with us this afternoon, if you could put in the chat box where you're from so we can celebrate hairdressers from all over the world. So give me just one moment. Today, because of the quarantine, I am flying a little solo. So give me just one moment to get set up. I'm seeing Toronto here and the Bay Area, California. Welcome. So today what I wanted to share with you is I wanted to share a little bit of what I was thinking about is when we join our guests back in the salon, whenever we can healthfully be together again, there will be a bit of a gap in between that and timing. And I have seen a ton of beautiful support for the pros and a gorgeous movement of hairdressers and guests across the country saying that they're going to stand with pros. And I think that that is amazing. And I think we should definitely support that movement. But in the same time, there is a reality of a good percentage of our guests in this interim, not that it's offensive to you as the professional, but they just won't be able to wait. You know, whether that be they are personally in a stressful situation and it's something that's going to make them feel better. If they go grab a box dye and try to touch up the roots. And we all know that that's going to lead to some challenges for us as hairdressers when we get them back in the chair. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to focus on a quick tip technique in order to help your guests transition back into professional hair color. So one of the major things that I see as a difference between what we do and what the products that we use behind the chair and what they can purchase out in the drugstores or department stores or online, a major difference that I see is the opacity. And I hope you guys all agree with that, is even if the guest is clever enough to know to pick the direct or the same level, the opacity of the products that they can purchase and the opacity of the products that we use are a completely different weight. And there's actually a reason behind that. So if you were in the industry of creating box dyes, or I know that's the more slang term for it, for consumers that have never been trained, because we know how many hours we put into our training, if you were looking to do that, you might make the product a little more foolproof. And the way that they do that is they pack more color molecules into the box dye. So let's say you have a level 5, and it is equal to our level 5, they would add more pigment to it, then they would actually add stuff to make it so it hits each level of the hair. Meaning it does have, most of them have some direct dyes in them. So that's why when we look at box color and we look at the coloring that we use as professionals, box coloring tends to look a little more inky or flat and matte. Can you guys agree with that? Give me a little shout out if you agree with that. And that change in opacity or that change in finish can actually create banding in our guest's hair. So I think we've all kind of seen this, and the problem that we're going to have, which is going to be a glorious problem when we go back into the salon, is that we are going to be looking at guest after guest after guest, correct? Because we're going to be jam-packed, and we're going to have some quick, easy techniques in order to break through some of these demarcation lines, and in order to break through and return our guests back to where they started. So I'm very excited today to share with you a technique that I know that I will be using a ton when I'm back behind the chair, and I hope you will too. So I am going to bring you in a little bit on my beautiful guest, Erica. I think we all know Erica very well. So here is Erica. So we are going to suppose that in the time that we have been in quarantine, Erica has done a box eye and has a demarcation line that is a little bit of a more opaque, but on level. So your first step is going to be to do the root touch-up. So just in order for the sake of time, I have already applied her retouch. So quick tips for a retouch is I like to take what we call a bead on my brush and apply it directly to the scalp area. You want to make sure, especially with a technique like what we're going to do, is you have a good amount of hair color flooding the scalp area, because we're going to have to use that in order to do some color blending or color fusing. I'm already seeing some comments on loving some sun-kissed lightning oil. I was actually going to say to all of my friends out there, there is 2 products that I am going to be stocking up on prior to my return into the salon. The first one is sun-kissed lightning oil. And can somebody guess what the second one's going to be? The 2 products are fairly similar. The second one will just give you a touch more lightening. Aha, Anna got it, Anoa Clear. And Anoa Clear is what we're going to be using today. So the 2 products that are going to help you quickly diffuse out banding and opacity or heavy weight to color, those are going to be your 2 options. All right, so first what we're going to do is setting up. This is our guest that normally comes in every 4 to 5 weeks. She has done a couple touch-ups in between the quarantine at home that is more opaque, and it is giving us a horizontal line of demarcation. So we're going to retouch her. And my suggestion is, when you go back to retouch somebody who's been box coloring their hair, I would suggest to take your level and deepen it 1/4 of a level. Because even if they're not 100% happy with the opacity that the color is giving them, or the depth that they have now in their hair, their eye is going to be used to it. So it's going to be an easier transition to going back to their regular color, as if their first appointment, you take their formula and deepen it by 25% or 1/4 level. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going back into my quadrants. I applied my root touch-up, and I'm going to apply my root touch-up up until the band. And then, as soon as we hit that band of demarcation, then we're going to stop pulling through, because that is where we're going to know to start fusing our colors. So because I like to work in smaller sections keep you neater, I am going to create my quadrant, and I'm going to cut it in half on a diagonal. And now I'm going to pin this up and away. I find working in smaller sectioning areas allows me to stay neater and cleaner, and it allows me to keep track. So the first thing I have, and I will be, is I've got my Dia Richesse. The formula that I chose for this mannequin head is 1/2-4-1-5, 1/2-5-3-2 with 9 volume. I will say part of these formulas are what I had access to, because we know in the quarantine, we want to keep everyone healthy and stay out of public. And so I went through and picked formulas of stock that I had at home. The next color I'm going to use is actually Anoa Clear. And it's Anoa Clear with 30 volume. So we know permanent color doesn't lift in a traditional sense. It doesn't lift previously colored hair, but it shifts it. So it gives it a shift or a move, which is going to help clean off or cleanse off that opacity. Kind of how I said in the beginning, we talked about box dyes having actually more pigment in it and also having the ability to have almost like a direct dye sitting on the surface area. That sitting on the surface is going to give us the most amount of opacity. So with this Anoa Clear, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to cleanse off the surface. Then once it's cleansed off the surface, then it's going to go a little bit in the cuticle and it's going to push those color molecules out. Then it's going to use what little strength it has left in the cortex of the hair, starting to dissolve a little bit in there. So, and when I say dissolve, I'm not saying break down, or we all know that Anoa is extremely nourishing. I'm just talking about shrinking down the pigments in the hair. So that's our Anoa Clear, and that's how that's going to work. Similar to that is the Sun-Kissed Lightning Oil, which I've seen a lot in the chat box, and you got to give that product love too. They are very similar. The one thing is because Anoa is an oil versus water system, it is not from the brand recommended to put on wet hair. So they brilliantly came out with Sun-Kissed Lightning Oil to act very similar to it, but to have the flexibility to use on towel dried hair also. Know that from my experience, I find the Sun-Kissed Lightning Oil just to be a little bit less strong. So that's kind of one way I pick is either by viscosity, because I know I can lift up the developer, use a higher developer and get a little bit more potency out of the product. So it's either viscosity or what I'm working on. So in this case, we're going to stick with the Anoa Clear. And then the last thing I'm going to use is my Multi-Techniques powder. And I picked Multi-Techniques powder in full disclosure because it is the only lightener I have at home right now. It's a fantastic lightener. But we're not looking in this case for extreme lift. So this guest again is going to be that guest that is a single touch-up, single process, maybe has been afraid of dimension before. So it's a good technique in order to get them some movement into the hair and to correct banding. So we did our root touch up, brought it up to the band, have enough color on there so we have some play when we get in there. So the one thing that I'm going to say is when you go in to work on banding, banding is in a horizontal method through the hair, correct? When we see a band, it's always horizontal. So when we go into correct banding, we can never put any color in horizontally. If we put any color in horizontally, we are going to accentuate or have a harder time breaking up that line. So we are going to go in on all diagonals because this is going to be a very fluid, free-flowing technique. So you either have to go diagonal or vertical, depending on what you're working on and the look that you're looking to go for to break up a horizontal band. All right. So I did see a question, so I'm going to try to get to all of the questions as I can. Because I am flying solo, it is a little more difficult to see, but I did see a question about can you use Sun-Kissed Lightning Oil with 40 volume? You could. I personally normally stick to a lower volume for the aspect of you're not looking to get a ton of punch out of the product. So when I'm using a Sun-Kissed Lightning Oil or an Anoa Clear, I'm really looking for that shift off the surface area of the hair and the cuticle area of the hair. So I don't want you to think of it directly as a lightener, even though it'll give you some lift. It's not a powerful, like powerhouse product. And when you're working on things cleaning off the surface, sometimes if you go in with a higher volume, you actually can push those surface molecules into the hair. So I tend to stick in 30 or under personally. All right, so what we're going to do is we are working on a diagonal, and we're working on a diagonal that cuts into the hairline. And the reason why is we're going to be shifting all three colors, and we want to make sure that we hit the hairline with all three colors rotating, so when you pull back, you don't have just a solid veil of color. So the first thing I'm going to use is I'm going to use a planchette. Since we're going to be shifting three different colors through the mid-lengths and ends, and I don't want to take time to wash my hands or wipe my hands after every time, our planchette has two sides to it, and then our handchet has one side to it. So you're going to see I'm going to use one color, two color, and then the lightener is going to be with my hands. So the first color that we're going to put in is going to be our Deer Richesse, or our darkest color. Now I'm going to work side to side to open up the hair always. And I really think of this technique more as even though it's a corrective, I think of it, just try not to overcomplicate it. It's more so a beautiful pull through. Now I'm flipping my planchette over to my clean side of my planchette, stocking it up with some clear, and I'm going to take about a 1/4 inch section. What we want is we want this to be very soft and natural. And I'm going to put that underneath. And now I'm going to go in with my fingers and blend it. Blend it out. So the thing that I always think of when I'm applying hair color is the more beautiful it looks processing, the more beautiful the end result is going to be. If you have lumps and bumps or what I call mountains on the outside of the hair, you're going to get different strengths of deposit. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take my lightener and I'm going to put it into my hand. And I'm going to play. So very gently smoothing it out as I go. Notice that I didn't start at where my band would be. I started further down, and again, in about 1/2 or 1/4 inch sections to 1/2 inch, depending on the density of the hair. Now I'm going to work my way up, and then, so you see how it's fluid. You want to make sure, let me bring this down just a little bit because it's in the chat box. You want to make sure that this looks gorgeous as you're processing. If anything is looking lumpy, bumpy, or uneven, fix it before you go. So I heard, what volume did you use? I used 30 volume with my lightener. So now what I'm going to do, and if I were to be in the salon, I would be using meshes, but I'm just going to put a method of separation. Because I'm at home, I have foils at home, so that's why I'm using the foils. It's not to be like a traditional foil. I just placed it on top, and what that's going to do is that's going to make it so the hair doesn't get laid down. We're not worried fully about wrapping each individual strand or encasing it. This is an open air, free-flowing technique, but I do need to make sure I'm dispersing the weight of the hair, because what's going to happen with these three colors, if the hair weighs itself down, is it's going to collapse and cause a little bit of bleeding or marbleization. So that foil isn't there as a traditional foil sense. It's just there to create that separation and the diffusion of weight. So now we flip our planchette over again, opening up the hair. I'm working side by side, if you notice, in a crisscross method, because the hair strands are round. You want to make sure that you get them fully saturated. How's it looking? Okay, what did I say? I think I missed this, but what did you do for the retouch? So the formula for the retouch is Dia Richesse, and it is half 415, half 532. Sound good to everybody? Those are some rich, gorgeous tones, right? So the 415 is a dark brown, blue, red, violet, and the 532 is a gold, violet, in a brown level. So going in, opening it up, kind of using my hands. If you notice, it is full saturation. We are not balayaging. We are fully saturating the hair, working it up. You also want to work a little bit with the saturation or amount of lightener you're using. The more lightener on the hair, the more the hair is going to develop, or the lighter it's going to get. So if we work up in the top and we're slowly spreading the lightener out a little bit, you're going to get less lift. When you're working in a blending technique like this, you want to make sure that the end result is going to be warm. Anytime lightener and color touch each other, it's going to leave you in a warm end result. So going to the questions, my volume with clear is 30 volume Anoa clear. What if you're normally retouching with Anoa or Majorelle? Use the same technique, most definitely. Traditionally, I would be using Anoa, but again, working in a quarantine situation, I had to go with what I have at home. So I had a good stock of darker Dia Richesse colors. I did not with Anoa or Majorelle. So this technique is not brand specific. It's not tone or color specific. The only thing you want to make sure is that your end result is going to be a neutral or a warm. Sound good? What level of lift are you trying to achieve? So that is a wonderful question. I'm still working really quick on a diagonal up till the top. And when we get into this front quadrant, we're going to change our sectioning. So still working on the same diagonal. With this technique, you're looking for fluid movement. So going back to the scenario that I would use this in, now you can use this in a few different scenarios, so it doesn't have to be one. But the scenario I would use this in is we're back in the salon. You have a guest who's traditionally a single process, and she has banding in her hair. So this is going to build up soft dimension. I'm not looking for lots of levels of lift. I'm really looking for shift, and maybe to have your darkest level be one level darker than your medium level, which is 1 to 2 levels darker than your lightest level. So you see how it's just slowly building. I think I lost it for a second. It said that the video paused, but we're slowly building movement in the hair. We're not looking for dramatic jumps in levels. If you were looking for dramatic jumps in levels, you could still use this technique, but you would have to isolate each section. Because we're not looking for dramatic jumps in levels, we can place and stack sections on top of each other. So now we're going to go to the lightest color. And notice that when I'm in the wide section of the head, I'm breaking each section up into 2 sections. Somebody just asked, does Majorelle have a clear? And now we do in Majorelle Glow. If you love Majorelle Glow, let's see some hearts up there. So Majorelle Glow has introduced a Majorelle Clear. I have not yet used it in this type of technique or regards, so I can't speak to that quite yet. But if one of our friends logging in have used it in that regards, you can go ahead and tell us your experience, but I have not yet. So I have only used Sunkissed Lightning Oil and Anoa Clear in this method. So again, we're working with thicker saturation down through the mids and ends, and then a lighter saturation into where the banding would be. And we're going to fuse it. So you want it to look like a grayscale would on a computer. So it slowly gets from darker to lighter. I see some Majorelle Glow Love. So now we're going to go back to our darkest color, and we're almost at the top of the head. So if you notice, our diagonal has slightly pivoted up to a more vertical, and our last two sections will sit almost exactly on that vertical T or the top of our quadrant. So we're going to go in with our darkest color. Oh boy me, I almost forgot to lay our method of separation down to keep, and all that's for, again, is to keep the weight of the product from collapsing the three colors together. And thank you for someone who let me know that I forgot that foil. Good looking out. It's hard when you're getting into a conversations and pulling through. And pulling through. So we have our two guests that we're going to have in our salon, right? The ones that followed your beautiful posts about supporting pros, and they're letting those beautiful, shiny, glittery whites grow out. And then we have the other ones that maybe could not wait due to whatever reason, and they panicked and bought a box, and that's okay too. We need to support those lovely ladies also. But something to think about is for the ones that waited, we might have a little bit of an issue with the amount of grow out that they're going to have. So something to think about when you're scheduling your appointments is, when was their last appointment? And if there's someone who does a touch-up and highlights, are you able to do that in one appointment, or will you have to break it up into two? Because once the hair grows out so far from the scalp, you're going to have to choose either to put your retouch on first and drag that farther down and not get as much root nearness with the highlights, or you might have to choose to put the highlights in first, then put the retouch around it and have a little bit of those sparklers coming through, or you might choose to separate it, put on the retouch, let it process, dry, and highlight. So just something to think about when you're looking at scheduling to get back into the salon is maybe take a peek at those guests' history and when was their last appointment in. So I see it. Can you do this technique doing stitches instead of taking slices as a subsection? That is an awesome, awesome question. Of course you could. I do want to remind you that even though these are slices, they are extremely thin slices, and we're not working with products that are going to make a huge level change or a level difference. Of course, you could do it in stitches, and if you do it in stitches, I do want to see it, so tag me in your work. And I would use stitches if I had a little bit more difference in the levels. So we are starting back. If you notice, I created a subsection. So I took my quadrant and I split it in half. Then I did a diagonal forward coming into the hairline, because again, we want to make it so when she pulls her hair back, we have all different definition or different colors going through it. So diagonal forward coming through, diagonal forward coming into the hairline, and clip that up and away. And now what I'm going to do is start again with my darkest color, which is more like the base color. When formulating, again, I just want to reiterate, when formulating your guest's base color, if they have used at-home hair color on the in-between, so since we've been able to healthfully be in the salon together, if they've used that, then you might want to think about deepening their formula a quarter level, because even though they may not love the opacity of the box color, their eye is used to it. So putting their traditional color back on them to their eye could look a little translucent. I just saw, what is your Instagram name? Because I am not overly computer savvy, my Instagram name is, oh no, it's backwards. I didn't even think about that. If you can read backwards, Ashley, A-S-H-L-E-Y, Zajac, Z-A-J-A-C, and the underscore. So I didn't even think about that. I'm using the, I should have wrote it backwards for you. That is where you can find me. So now I'm going through with my Anoa Clear. Mr. Vanity, I love your comment. That is very true. So full saturation, remember to do your crisscrosses, then go back through to smooth out and even out the amount put on the hair, and then going in and doing a little blending and pull it back away from the face. We're always working away from our guest's face. And now we're gonna do our lightest piece. Again, working in fine sections. All right. All right, now we're gonna saturate that lightener into the hair. Again, we're not working in a balayage method. We are fully saturating the lightener into the hair. And again, if your retouch is a level 5, your mid color, you would shoot for a 6 or a 6.5, and your light color, you would shoot for a 7.5 or an 8. So this technique is not meant for a ton of different level changes. It's meant for almost a very natural, free-flowing. Now we're gonna put the foil on. Again, if I was in the salon, I would use meshes because they're a little bit lighter and more comfortable on our guests, and they move a little bit better with the hair. All right, so now we're working in this top section. We're continuing on a diagonal, and we are back with the darkest color. So can you guys visualize how this would break up very quickly, would break up any horizontal banding in the hair? There we go. We have a question of why wouldn't you do the back 2 quadrants first? And I was about to address that when we were all done. So I would. What I would do is I would do the back left, then the back right, then the front left, then the front right. But what I have done on the other side of this mannequin's head is I have actually finished the technique fully. So I finished the technique and styled her out because you will do the exact same thing across the whole head. So you would start in the back right or back left, move to the back right, move to the front left, move to the front right. And thank you so much for reminding me of that. And you would literally be working in the 4 quadrants on a diagonal doing the exact same thing. So it's more of a butterfly technique across the whole head. So every quadrant has diagonal going into or traveling into the hairline, but I wanted you guys to be able to actually see the technique finished in one video. So earlier today, I did the technique and I styled her hair. So that way, once we're done with the front, we can turn it over and you can actually see what we did. So now we're moving to the lightener. So remember to blend in, and we don't take big gobs of lightener all the way to the retouch, and we're blending the retouch out. And gently setting. If you notice I'm not over directing or pushing back, I'm gently allowing the hair to fall. So what I'm going to suggest, and I will say, so I am on day 24 of my quarantine in the area that I'm in. And I will say today, yesterday and today, playing with my mannequin head has done wonders for me. So I would suggest, if you have the ability and you have the stuff at home, try this technique on the mannequin head. Put yourself back into the artist that you are. It will do wonders for your frame of mind. I will say I feel incredible after just getting my hands in some hair color, getting that smile back in. Could you do this a second visit back? Of course you could. Of course you could. If you needed to, of course you could. Because I'm talking and I'm pointing everything out, I will say it does take longer than a normal pull through, but it shouldn't take an extreme amount of time. It really is, as long as you can practice pulling through with the planchette. If you're not used to pulling through hair with planchette, it'll take a little bit longer. And then the fusing at the retouch area takes a little bit longer. It all depends on how you schedule, but of course you could do it the second time back. And of course you can use this technique if you're looking to build some dimension in someone's hair. I use this technique if I've got somebody who maybe is afraid of highlighting. I would go through and do this technique so it doesn't look like traditional highlights or balayage, because we've all come across that guest that maybe had some really bad past experiences with putting highlights in their hair. This is a great way to build dimension without freaking them out a little bit. So now if you notice, I'm kind of painting in to the hairline a little bit on this piece and then blending it out, but that we're right up in that front hairline where you would say like the traditional money piece or signature piece would be. How would you suggest charging for this? So that is an excellent question, and always based off of your area. So there isn't you definitely do need to charge a good amount more for this because this is a technique and it is a corrective technique. So whether this would be a highlight charge and a base charge, where I am at, we break it down even. We have a technique charge. So this is what we would call a global technique. And so it would be your base color plus your base color, plus I believe it's $40. So whatever your global application charge would be, it would be 2 global applications plus a $40. So it all depends on the area that you're in and your pricing structure. But it is more like a corrective highlight. All right, so now we're pulling this through, making sure it's fluid and soft. Somebody asked if we could repeat the formula. So the retouch formula is Dia Richesse half 415, which is a dark brown, blue, red, violet, mixed with a 5, which is a level 5 is a brown, brown 532, so gold violet. So it's a 4 blue, red, violet mixed with a gold violet to give a lot of richness and kind of playing with the balancing of the color wheel. And then that's the retouch and the darkest pull through. Then we have a Noah Clear with 30 volume. My friend and amazing colorist, Shelly Moore, likes to call pulling through a medium and a light as a for sure and a maybe. So our maybe would be the Noah Clear, which means it just gets a little bit of lift, a little bit of shift to the previously colored hair. And then our lightener, which is a for sure, that's going to break through any banding in the hair. All right, and then the last little bit, we're going to end with just a very small lightener piece on the top as our last piece. So feather that in, feather that through, and pull down. Okay, my friends, and Ellie is complete. So, what I want to show you now is our finished product. So our finished product, which, mind you, I will say I am a departmentalized colorist, so I did style her hair, but our finished product is just some soft movement. If you pull back, you can see just little pieces. So when we had the question of would you weave instead of slicing, it does look weaved once it's done. It looks very, very natural, very subtle. So the colors just kind of flow through the hair, and the same thing in this back hairline through here. So we have very soft, very subtle, very natural. The question of when the colors lay on top of each other, we're not smushing the products into each other. We're gently laying it, and we're not worried about transferring in the aspect of, we do have a little bit of diffusing the weight. That's why the foils are in there. But because there's not a ton of contrast, you're not going to see that transformation. It is all very softly stacked in there. So this again is what my solution would be to how do you break through banding in our guests that might have used box color in between. So thank you all so much. Let me readjust for a second. Thank you all so very much for joining me today in my kitchen for our L'Oreal Professionnel Cribs edition. I hope we meet again soon. I know that once we can healthfully be together, we will have the biggest hairdressing party the world has ever seen. So definitely feel free to hit me up at Ashley, which you'll have to, again, read this backwards because I thought through a lot, but I didn't think through the reverse camera. It's Ashley Zajac _. I miss you all, and I wish you guys great health and